Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on conflict-free direct-to-consumer, migrating from channel challenges to channel collaboration. I'm Tom McFadyen, and I'm honored to have Michael von Bodungen with us from VTEX on our session today. So we're going to talk about some quick introductions of who we are, dive into some of the channel challenges in the existing models, the direct-to-consumer model with simple e-commerce, and then move into marketplace fundamentals, the new technology of how to transform that challenge into collaboration in channel collaboration, our last section. And then we'll have some Q&A at the end. Please enter any questions you have into the Q&A text box in the Zoom webinar event. So let's start with our introductions. So one slide about each of our companies, and then we'll get into the real educational content of the session. Let me first hand it over to Michael.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, I'm Michael von Bodungen, and I'm the Chief Customer Officer at VTEX. So I have responsibility for really what happens post-sale at VTEX, from customer success to our professional services team and our product support. If you're not familiar with VTEX, we're a digital commerce platform. One of the things that makes us very unique is that we provide both commerce, B2C and B2B, plus order management and marketplace capabilities, all in a multi-tenant SaaS platform. We have a really fast time to market and time to revenue for our customers. We started in Latin America 20 years ago. We've moved now into the North American, European, and APAC marketplaces. We've been public this year in July on the New York Stock Exchange and are growing fast. So happy to be here today and hosting the webinar with Tom.
Thanks, Michael. So one slide about McFadyen with 4 facts. First is we do big projects. We've done mid-market and some innovator startups as well, but a lot of big enterprise accounts and really pushing the threshold of marketplaces on pretty much every dimension you can consider. SKUs, GMV, web assets, page views, user accounts, pretty much everything that you can call large or big or challenging on a marketplace, we've pushed that limit. Second, we've been doing it for a long time. So we've been in business for a third of a century, serving over 10% of the Fortune 500. Almost a quarter century, we've been building e-commerce sites, generating tens of billions of dollars of gross merchandise value, GMV. And for 15 years, we've been building marketplaces, initially building from scratch, and then more recently building with commercial marketplace platforms like VTEX. Third, we're a global organization, headquarters in the US, but we also provide offshore delivery from India, been operating there for about 2 decades, and from Brazil, nearshore services for almost a decade. And last but not least, we're innovators in really thought leaders in the marketplace space. So from our marketplace best practices book, if you don't have a copy of it, we're happy to get you a copy of this book, a 470-page Bible essentially on marketplace best practices. This webinar series, Marketplace Best Practices series, is based on different chapters in the book. A lot of other content we've help contribute to the industry, like the marketplace maturity model, which we'll talk a little bit about today, methodologies for implementing marketplaces and so forth. But let's get into the educational content of our session today. Just the real meat of our presentation. So talking about channel challenges. Those of you on the beginning may have seen this on the title screen. Essentially, it's from a LinkedIn post I did several years ago, and how really retailers are starting to become brands offering private label. That's not really the content of this presentation, but the second side here is brands becoming retailers and starting to sell. And obviously there's a channel conflict there. When retailers become brands and brands become retailers, who's owning the customer and who's getting the profit? And that's what we're going to solve today in our discussion about marketplaces. So let's look at the traditional supply chain in retail. So from a brand manufacturer to a reseller, which could be either a retail brick and mortar store, or it could be an e-commerce reseller, to the end consumer, the customer. So let's step through this process, and we'll use this same model for a few different approaches. So the brand manufacturer produces goods at a cost of $1. The reseller buys them for $2, and there's a B2B transaction there, and the brand makes some profit off of that. They get some data about the B2B transaction. The reseller has the goods in their possession. And so everybody's happy in that part of the chain. The next part of the chain is the reseller sells that good to an end customer for $3. and the transaction occurs, the goods are exchanged, the reseller gets the profit from that transaction. They get the B2C customer data, they own the relationship with the customer and can really build up a relationship with that customer. The brand, however, is disconnected from that whole final transaction. They have no customer relationship, they have no B2C transaction data. They really can't extend and build upon that relationship to learn what's most effective when selling to the end consumer. So this is the challenge with the traditional supply chain, again, either in brick and mortar stores or in online e-commerce stores as resellers. Now, if a brand decides to go direct to consumer with just an e-commerce site or selling physically, but still trying to maintain their existing channel of their resellers, the first couple steps remain the same, as the shop will for a while will still buy the goods and inventory them in their retail store. But then what happens next is the challenge if a brand starts selling e-commerce or physically direct to consumer and setting that same price or perhaps even lower cost, the customer will buy directly from the manufacturer of the brand. The brand gets the data that and owns the customer experience, gets the profit, but the reseller gets no customer experience, gets no profit, does not have any relationship with the customer, and they're left holding the goods that are unsold sitting on their shelves. So that's not going to last for very long, of course, so the resellers will end up stopping to purchase from that brand. Now, how do you solve these two challenges? With the marketplace model, we start with that same first couple steps. So the brand manufacturer makes it for $1, the reseller buys it for $2, the transaction takes place, the brand still gets that B2B data from the reseller is stocking the good at their physical brick and mortar stores or the distribution center for e-commerce. But next step is a little bit different. So now the brand manufacturer operates their own marketplace. So from that marketplace, they can have a transaction directly with a consumer, the end customer, setting that same price, can be $3. But the, again, important thing is the brand sets the price in this marketplace model. There are options where can be set by others as well. But in this case, we're talking about the brand setting the price and consummates that transaction, collects the money from the customer. The brand gets the B2C data and owns a relationship with the customer, which again, that's the key difference here, which is what most brand manufacturers want. However, what the next step is not the brand directly fulfilling it to the customer. The brand sends an order over to the reseller, who will then get that customer data from the order. They will fulfill the product or the goods to the customer. They get their profit, they get their customer relationship, they get their data, and everybody's got a green, happy, smiley face here. And the traditional channel of selling to the end customer through resale can happen as well. So this business model solves this, and we're going to talk a little bit more detail about what these stick figures try to simplify here. So I'll hand it over to Michael now.
Yeah, one of the things that comes up too when people talk about going direct to consumer as a brand is oftentimes they're very dependent on a retail channel. Here in the US, we sometimes exist in sort of a duopoly of large players, right? You have Walmart and Target kind of in the general retail segment. For years, you had Best Buy and Circuit City. Now I think you kind of look at it as Best Buy and Amazon, Home Depot and Lowe's, right? And maybe Macy's and Hudson Bay. And so I've, encountered on several occasions, in doing some of these seminars and webinars with people, some of the brands will say, you know what, I'm just so dependent right now on my channel, whether it be Amazon or one of the big retailers out there, that if we go direct, I'm afraid they're just going to swap us out for someone else in that category or create their own brand. And so I think as you embark on this journey, one of the things you have to look at is kind of what is your brand power. One of our customers, very large appliance manufacturer, talked about years ago, made the decision to go direct, and it really angered one of their large, retail players, and they were taken out of that channel. And it lasted about 6 months, but the channel came back and said, you know what, we need you back. And that was, a classic example of someone that has a lot of brand power. I think all of us have seen how Nike has been able to operate as well, trying Amazon and other things, pulling back, but they carry that brand clout. So I think for everybody in this category that's considering it, you have to look at really, your brand clout and how willing you are to kind of take some bets too as you look at how you structure the marketplace as well. Next slide, Tom. So I think the other thing that comes into play is that, you know, when you look at your business too, sometimes there are regulatory issues that may prevent you from going direct to consumer. So some of those areas where there are a lot of rules and regulation, and sometimes they vary not just, you know, at the federal level, but at the state level too. Alcohol is a classic one where manufacturers generally cannot sell directly to the consumer. Firearms comes with a whole host of rules and regulation. Pharmaceutical companies, people that manufacture the drugs, right, just cannot sell directly to consumer. Tobacco, you know, automotive purchases, if you think about the whole dealer concept that exists today and what Tesla was able to really, you know, promote and changing a model, right? There are ways you can work through some of these scenarios, but I think, you know, as in your industry, you have to really look at what the governance is that's been set up, and then explore ways that you can work you know, around that model or work in conjunction with it, but make it legally compliant for you. And so we have a couple of examples to dive in a little deeper. If we go to the next slide, Tom. So thinking about the alcoholic beverage industry right today, beer, wine, spirits, generally, you know, you have the manufacturer. There are distributors that have that license to distribute in a particular state. That eventually goes out to retail. And it's the retail that can actually then sell directly to the consumer. And you'll see, you know, as you go from state to state, that the rules can vary. I live here in Texas, and some of the microbreweries here, they're restricted to being able to sell, like, I think it's up to like 12, you know, 2 6-packs, 12 cans of beer, you know, to people that can take out the store, or a growler, for example, right? And that legislation may change, and they may up it to a case, but it's a very you know, restricted model, and it just varies by state to state. So you have to look at those requirements individually. If we go to the next one, Tom, the pharmaceutical industry is another one. There's a very sort of well-defined, call it distribution and supply chain process for a patient to be able to get a prescription filled. The manufacturers of those drugs generally work through 3 very large distributors that manage, you know, almost 97% of that market. They in turn supply all the pharmacies. You have players like the pharmacy benefit managers who contract with the insurance companies to, you know, direct their patient population towards the pharmacy. But again, thinking about, you know, what Tom was discussing earlier in some of those slides, the manufacturers of those drugs really don't have direct access to the consumer and, you know, who's actually purchasing their drug. That lives within the pharmacy and potentially, you know, within the distributor.
All right. Let's move on to some of the fundamentals of this marketplace model and how it can help in avoiding channel conflict. So what is a marketplace? This model, the marketplace maturity model, MMM, defines 5 levels of marketplaces. So starting with the first tier of first-party e-commerce, this has, you know, been around about a quarter century since the introduction of SSL. It's a pipeline, which I'll talk about a little bit more in an upcoming slide, of sequential activities where the operator, the e-commerce operator, has to source all products, manage all images, merchandise them, set the price, stock them, hold them both financially and physically, handle fulfillment, handle returns and customer support, a whole sequence of events that happen. And this is much like what happens in traditional retail, brick and mortar retail. Dropship is a minor incremental improvement over e-commerce in the tier 2 of the marketplace maturity model. It takes one of those steps in that process out, which is the fulfillment. So the operator, the e-commerce operator, still needs to negotiate contracts, source goods, import images, do the merchandising, set the price, handle customer support, but the fulfillment step is outsourced to a third party, generally the manufacturer or big distributor. The third tier of the marketplace maturity model is when you really platform your business, and this is a phrase that some people may have heard: the platform revolution, the platform economy, the platform business models. Essentially, it's where you enable third parties to do most of those activities in the pipeline. So third parties all work under standard terms and conditions, but they source products, they load the images, they merchandise them, they set the price, they handle fulfillment, sometimes returns as well. So it's a whole outsourcing of a lot of these activities, which enables greater scale, greater margins. The operator can still curate the categories and products to ensure quality and vision with the brand, alignment with the brand vision. Level 4, quantitative management, is when the numbers really drive the business. So as you scale to hundreds of sellers, thousands of sellers, and hundreds of thousands of SKUs or millions of SKUs, really you need to automate a lot of that in terms of managing catalog import, catalog management, seller management, looking at transformations in your business from taking what's a very profitable third-party good, and maybe you want to bring that into your first-party owned inventory, or vice versa. If something's moving very slow for you, based on the numbers, you outsource that to third-party sellers. And then the 5th tier is optimizing, or really creating new business models, doing some advanced integrations, offering new solutions to your customers. For example, offering services in addition to physical goods. So it could be somebody installing a ceiling fan that's sold by a third-party seller. So third-party installation service and third-party products. So that's an example of optimizing. 5 tiers of marketplace maturity model. There's a very good detailed white paper available for download, McFadyen.com/MMM. So I mentioned the words pipeline and platform. So to graphically show you this, the first step is sourcing those goods. So finding them from a distributor or manufacturer, negotiating contracts. We've seen some clients where in e-commerce, it can take a month or two to negotiate contracts, set pricing, and import products into the ERP. Again, all these sequential activities that have to happen one after the other, all performed by employees of the e-commerce operator. Merchandise the product, set the price, hold the inventory, again, both physically and financially. You need to put out the money to get the inventory, and you need to have physical distribution center or fulfillment center to hold it. Process the orders. This step's usually automated, but still a step in the process. And then fulfill orders and even customer support at the end to get to those customers. So that's a linear sequential activity. Again, it can take months sometimes to make this all happen. On the other hand, a platform business, you just have a smaller team to manage this and the different roles. So somebody to recruit sellers, somebody to support sellers, somebody to process orders. Again, the processing orders is typically automated, so it's not necessarily a human doing that. But you have the standard terms and conditions I mentioned, which apply to all the sellers. And this can be hundreds, thousands of sellers with this network ecosystem serving the same customers, but you can have a variety of different people or organizations in this. It could be a third-party reseller getting stuff from a distributor, getting their goods from a distributor, or a reseller might get goods from multiple distributors, or you might have multiple resellers sourcing goods from the same distributor. In this case, you might have price competition where the two resellers are trying to offer the lowest price for those goods in order to get to, quote, win the buy box on the marketplace. Distributors can sell directly from manufacturers as well. And you can have the brand manufacturer, which is the subject of today's conversation, as a seller on a marketplace, or operating their own marketplace, which is what we're going to talk about in a little bit. So this is really the difference between pipeline versus platform businesses. And you're really outsourcing all those sequential activities to third parties. So let's take a quick look at some stats, and then I'll hand it over to Michael. So obviously, marketplaces are getting very popular, and both for the marketplace operator and retailers that are the brand producing the good, or resellers of goods that they sourced on a marketplace. People may find it on Amazon or elsewhere and then purchase it from directly from another retailer or from the brand. So this is definitely growing. So these are all statistics from Digital Commerce 360. The expectations of marketplace operators is that their business is going to grow 73% or stay about the same, 22%. Only 5% expect a decrease in their marketplace business. So 92% of Americans shopped on marketplaces. A lot of that's not just Amazon. Here it says 21% shopped from a new marketplace, and Michael will show you some of the other marketplaces that are very popular. And there's a huge increase in B2B marketplaces. So this is where we're talking again about brand manufacturers who want to go either direct to consumer or have a marketplace that's B2B, selling just to the resellers. So that grew from 70 marketplaces to 250 marketplaces in 2 years, according to Digital Commerce 360. Over to Michael.
Perfect. Thanks, Tom. So I think, originally most people think of marketplaces, they think of Amazon and eBay, right? Probably the two largest long running marketplace that exist. But, if you look over at the left and we talk about people like Walmart, Etsy, and Sears, think about they started out really kind of running their own e-commerce site, Walmart and Sears, and then looked at ways they could monetize their traffic in the same way that Amazon was getting, this influx of third-party sellers. And that's what they went out and did, right? They created the mechanism for third-party sellers to come onto their site and to begin to sell. And so today, those sites on the left, do over $1 billion worth of business through the marketplace channel. And you have others too, like Newegg, which is well known. And then companies like Best Buy as well, Bonanza, Jane, and then all the way down to like Overstock, Store Envy, and Blue Fly. So there are various, businesses along the way that have proven this model, and it continues to grow. And it's probably, I would say, in our, line of work, one of the hottest things that our prospects and customers talk to us about, which is the capability to launch their own marketplace, after they've been an established e-commerce player. Second thing too, and Tom alluded to this when he was showing kind of his stats, the B2B market, the global annual spend is about 4 times what it is in B2C. It's a huge opportunity mirror. And so often we think of these large, traditional B2C players, the Amazon, the eBays that cater to the consumer. But behind the scenes, there are all these B2B transactions that are taking place that are ripe for marketplace as well. And you can see over on the right, that's everything from trucking to freight to auto parts to grocery, energy. Many of the companies that we have in our portfolio of customers today at VTEX operate B2B marketplaces in effect, to help with getting closer to the consumer and enabling their smaller retailers to work within the distribution market. Over on the left too, you'll see really, if you look at the capital that's been raised, again, in these traditional B2B business, it's significant right now. And you can also see the number of startups in each vertical. So there's a flood of money right now coming in the marketplace, from private equity to VCs, to angel rounds, right? With people that are trying to create startups to address these needs specifically in these areas.
All right, thank you. Let's look at the flywheel that everybody's probably seen. Amazon's marketplace flywheel, the virtuous cycle. It actually wasn't Jeff Bezos's idea. It came from Jim Collins. Proposed the flywheel concept and taught it to Jeff Bezos. But essentially, in the Amazon simplified one here, we see a greater selection from more sellers, drive more selection, drives a better customer experience, drives more traffic, which attracts more sellers to get more selection again. It keeps the flywheel growing. Also, as you lower your cost structure, you get lower prices and improves the customer experience, drives more traffic. And again, the virtuous cycle keeps repeating. We made a more complicated one of this version of the virtuous cycle, adding a couple more points in here. So obviously you add more products with a marketplace to existing categories, adjacent categories, other categories, drives more customers. A lot of these benefits and effects from this drive more sales. Again, very similar to the Amazon one, helps drive more profits from not having the inventory and so forth. And for those of you on this on the webinar, we'll send you a copy of the slides here, so you don't have to try to jot all this down. But you can attract more sellers or resellers in the case of a D2C brand site. Collecting more data. Again, this is a very important part of marketplaces. A lot of people don't necessarily think that much about, but it helps you build those relationships, understand what are the top sellers, what segments like which products, do multivariate or analysis, predictive analytics to help you optimize your assortment. You can optimize your cross-channel sales as well, and get to know your customers better. This will also help drive store assortment. So if you're also an omni-channel, retailer selling both online and in store, that data can help you optimize what you offer in store and enable cross-channel delivery, fulfillment, returns, which will drive more store traffic. We'll talk about a couple examples of where this is actually seeing this buy online, pick up in store from a marketplace business model. So we talked about channel challenges. We talked about some fundamentals of the marketplace. Now let's look at how the marketplace business model can help on that channel collaboration. So Amazon, they offer local pickup and delivery from local stores. This is a fairly recent offering from them, but you can make a purchase on the Amazon website, choose store pickup, and go pick up the item at your local store. So here's an example of a TV on Amazon. You could purchase this Insignia TV, which is a Best Buy brand, and go to the local Best Buy store near us in Tyson's Corner, Virginia. Pick it up in the next 4 hours and 5 minutes, 58 minutes. So purchases made on the marketplace, fulfillment is done from the brick and mortar store of the reseller, it's not even a reseller in this case. It does happen to have a Fire TV in it, but it's a Best Buy product. Kohl's has also been very tightly integrated with Amazon. So a few years ago, they started offering in-store returns of Amazon products. Even if it's something that you didn't purchase from Kohl's, you can return at Kohl's. And they're getting tighter integration here, as well as service. A lot of marketplaces are popping up for, for an example of installation. You buy the product from a third party and you get the installation services from a third party. Michael?
Yeah. And I want to give an example too. If you think back to some of the slides I talked about at the beginning, we were talking about the different, regulatory issues that you might run into. This is an example of one of our customers, Nissan, obviously large, worldwide auto manufacturer. But you can actually order your car online, but behind the scenes, what's really happening is that the dealer is fulfilling the order at the end of the day. So as a consumer, I pick my car out, what I'm looking for. The marketplace is aware of the inventory across the dealerships. The funds are taken by Nissan, but then paid to the dealership. The time is arranged for you to come in and pick up your car. And it's really it's a complete online buying experience. So I think it just demonstrates that even in some traditional industries that maybe have always functioned in a dealer type model, there are ways to leverage the marketplace model and make all parties happy. The next one I think we go to, Thomas, I think is one of the best examples. So AB InBev, largest beer manufacturer, brewer in the world, one of our customers, has a solution in Latin America they call Courier, but across Colombia, Brazil, Argentina, Bolivia, they have examples of where AB InBev, through an app and through an online site, allows you to order beer and have it delivered in 35 minutes or less. Now, how are they actually making this work? They still have grocery stores, convenience stores, various small vendors throughout, these countries that are actually holding the product, keeping it cold, selling it, to in a brick and mortar sense. But AB InBev is operating the platform that allows the consumer to buy directly from AB InBev. They see one price. AB InBev determines who's going to fulfill it, and then they also schedule the delivery of that through their network of service providers. So this really highlights, I think, if you remember the last model that Tom showed in his animation, of really where both the manufacturer, the retailer, and the consumer are kind of all made whole in this, both from pricing, from knowing who the consumer is, and for that retailer still participating in the transaction rather just being direct with the manufacturer. And then I think we have one more that we want to talk about here, which is Carrefour, which is really a very large retailer based in France, but operates all over the world. This particular example is from Brazil. They're leveraging VTEX, also like AB InBev and Nissan, to run their marketplace here. And I wanted to highlight this kind of example. So in many marketplaces, you have the opportunity to see who the different sellers are. So on the product display page at Carrefour, this is an Electrolux microwave. And what you see are three different sellers. The first one is Carrefour. The second one is Electrolux, which is the manufacturer. And the third one is Frio Pecas, which is another retailer. Pricing is different. So as a consumer, you have your choice to pick the lowest or maybe a different provider. But this is a great example of where, the manufacturer, continues to participate in other people's marketplace and is recognized. So if they fulfill that transaction, they get, the customer data at the end of the day from this one.
All right, great. I can just see those green smiley faces over the AB InBev, the convenience store, and the person getting the beer. Let's look at some other statistics here. So this is a study by Forrester on B2B marketplaces. So more than half manufacturers sell on third-party marketplaces. So they sell on other channel partners through the marketplace, and they're confident in their ability, very confident or confident in their ability to convert their own marketplace visitors to buyers when they have their own marketplace, and as well as properly managing the final purchase stages. They feel more confident about converting visitors to buyers through an online marketplace, as well as feeling confident about the final stages of fulfillment. So making sure that that happens properly. Let's look at a couple of different use cases in the marketplace business model, and why some things like pricing might change. So I mentioned that sometimes you can have multiple resellers sourcing goods from the same distributor or reseller or brand manufacturer. And sometimes you want them to compete on price. That happens a lot on Amazon, and they often will drive down the price to win the quote buy box, meaning the default purchase option for that good. When multiple sellers are selling the same good, everybody wants to be the buy box, and that can be typically lowest price. It can be price plus shipping. It can be inventory status. It can be shipping time, but typically or highlighted featured seller, so forth, a sponsored seller based on advertising. But you may have sellers compete on price where they set the price themselves, or you may want to apply a MAP, minimum advertised price, so that the price will not go below a certain threshold. It does take some time to actually enforce that. And another model is sometimes, like, for example, in the parts industry, sometimes you want to set the price and fix the price so that all that pricing is consistent across all channels for purchase. So it could be on the marketplace, could be through a reseller setting their price. This is one, for example, on replacement parts, especially in B2B world. You may want to fix those prices on those spare parts and not have them fluctuate up and down, just to maintain the brand value. So a number of different options available there for pricing. And last slide we'll talk about here, and so we have time for Q&A here. The business of operating parallel channels simultaneously. So an example might be if resellers want to sell the main product that's, let's say, hundreds or thousands of dollars, but they don't want to be bothered selling a $5 or $10 spare part or replacement part or accessories. Sometimes it may be better to have that those low-cost parts and accessories sold by the brand manufacturer, and the reseller only focuses on the big ticket items. In examples like that, in other cases, the reseller may not stock the full catalog of parts and accessories. Some manufacturers, especially with highly configurable products, may make more sense to do that on the brand site, but fulfillment happens through a marketplace reseller. In fact, one of the first marketplaces we built was a IT procurement site for the U.S. Army for all their IT equipment, about $1 billion site, and that marketplace had a punch out to the Dell site for configuring your computer, your laptop, your desktop, your server, and then it would punch back into the marketplace and then be fulfilled by a party that owns a contract with the U.S. Army. Great example of resellers and sellers collaborating through the marketplace channel. Another channel in the marketplace business model is offering services. So this can be professional services, can be installation, can be delivery. We've seen huge transformation in the past decade in food delivery. So from DoorDash and Grubhub and Uber Eats to Instacart, and you can combine a variety of different services here. So at Instacart, you can buy your goods. You have the grocer as one party in the marketplace. You have the personal shopper, or the delivery person, which is again a marketplace of services for delivery. You also have the CPG brands who are paying for advertising and coupons on the Instacart site, and you have the customer who may or may not pay a delivery fee as well. So it's a four-sided marketplace. Another option, something we built for one of our clients, was a white label website. So they operate the sophisticated commerce and marketplace engine with a full catalog and fulfillment logic. But small resellers like mom and pop stores on the corner can just put their logo and brand that marketplace site as their own and operate as a white label service for the small resellers or retailers. And oftentimes warranty registration support, often handled by the manufacturer, even if the goods are purchased through other channel. All right, so we went through the channel challenges, looked at the marketplace fundamentals, and looked at how the marketplace business model can be used to help channel collaboration. Now let's get into our Q&A, the last part of our session here. So Tom Gatos from McFadyen, our Chief Marketing Officer, believe you've been collecting some Q&A from the audience.
Oh yeah, we've gotten some great participation. Thank you everybody for writing in your questions. We've probably got a little bit more here than we're going to be able to ask. So like I typed before, we'll be following up personally with anything we don't get to today. But without further ado, we'll start it. This is one that was asked recently. It's a little more high level. Should set the stage here quite nicely. What's the level of effort required to plan for, launch, and operate a new marketplace property? And I'm guessing that's assuming they're operating some level of digital commerce already. So just what's the, what's required to get started and to plan it out, I guess. And Tom, I think that would be probably to you first.
Okay, great. So we actually have a methodology. We're happy to send some information about this MES, Marketplace Enablement Steps. So it's a series of strategy, platform selections, tech stack selection, implementation, business readiness, including recruiting and onboarding sellers, launching it and supporting it. Typical timeframe for launching marketplace can be in the 3 to 6 months is a typical time frame. It can be shorter. We've done some faster and some have been longer. Some of our Fortune 50, Fortune 100 clients, it may be 6 to 9 months. Some smaller businesses, maybe shorter time frame. One of the nice things about VTEX, if you're using that as a commerce engine, it also adds the ability to quickly launch a marketplace, including in the network of VTEX sellers, existing retailers. So Michael, you probably talk best about that.
Yeah. No, I think I agree with you, Tom, on the 3 to 6 month time frame. It's what we typically see, and I often think too. I tell people that sometimes the technology side of it is the easiest part, right? You're doing e-commerce today. If you're on a platform like VTEX, then enabling the marketplace is really quite easy because you already have your existing site up and running. But I think one of the biggest steps that people have to think about and take is the seller recruitment, right? That's a big step. And you need to make sure that you've got the adequate resource dedicated to bring those suppliers, onboarding them, getting them launched onto the platform too. And as Tom alluded to, one of the interesting things about VTEX is that if you are an existing VTEX customer, because we're in a multi-tenant SaaS model, all the products and the catalogs are already up in our environment. So it's more about configuring that business relationship between the person that's going to operate the marketplace and maybe somebody else in VTEX that's going to be the seller. So we enable those two parties to come together without, call it, a new integration in that case.
Great.
Great answer, guys. Thanks. This next one, I'm kind of going to combine a couple here. This was from Garang and from Ellen, asked specific questions about technology. And it was basically variations of if I have existing commerce functionality on my site, but want to move more towards this model, what types of integrations are needed to actually layer on to what I already have to make this happen? So let's start with Michael on this one.
Yeah, so I think if you already have an existing e-commerce property, then I think what you look at is really a process for onboarding sellers, right? There's generally a registration process that people go through, web-based, right? They've got a sign-up facility that comes into a platform like ours where it goes through an approval process, right? Once that seller is approved, then there's some steps for them to begin to, bring on their catalog, their products, the pricing that they wish to do. There's a step there, obviously for the marketplace operator to be able to review, approve what they want to have, come into the marketplace. Those are typical things that you typically have to think about from the seller and the onboarding side, and then you need to make sure that you've got the ability to represent the way you want it in your e-commerce solution. So if you think back to some of the slides we showed, like the Carry For example, where you see very visibly who the different sellers are, that's something that needs to be surfaced, obviously on your page. if you operate in more of the white label space that Tom was alluding to, kind of in that last slide, where you're just, offering the product, but it's how you're actually fulfilling it behind the scenes, and you're not explaining to the customer that there's 3 different people out there that may supply it, right? That's a little bit behind the scenes, so there's nothing on the front end, but you still need the technology to support it. And then the other areas that I think people have to think about, from a technology perspective too, are things like payment and tax, right? In the marketplace model, there are cases where the marketplace will take the payment and then has to work out the payment of the sellers behind the scenes. There are marketplaces that we've had experience with in our customer base where the operator actually does not want to take the direct charge for all the transaction, but just the commission. And there are payment providers like Adyen has Adyen for Platforms as an example that helps with that whole payment management process. On the tax side, very similar. You have to think about where the seller's located, where the nexus is for them and the customer, not necessarily the marketplace. But sometimes there are legal requirements around the marketplace, being responsible ultimately for whether tax is paid. So, companies like Avalara, for example, are great help in that area too. So those are some of the things I'd call out. Tom, you may have some other things you want to mention here on this one as well.
You hit the main points. The tax and payment are very specific to marketplace, since a lot of payment processors for retail may not support the business model of marketplaces where it's actually a transaction on behalf of somebody else. And there's some activities like a KYC, know your customer, which ensures that you're not funneling money to drug dealers or terrorist organizations, things like that, as well as the tax calculation really depends on the nexus of the seller and the customer. So it's no longer the location of the e-commerce operator or where the e-commerce operator has a distribution center, but it's based on where the seller is. And that can vary quite a bit if you have hundreds or thousands of sellers in different state regulations shipping to customers all over the country or all over the globe. So there's definitely are important integrations, and the vendor selection process is pretty important there to ensure that they'll support the business model you want to deploy. And one comment on the integration of third-party sellers, there are a couple of main things you need to do there. One is the catalog import, harmonization, taxonomy mapping, making sure that third-party sellers catalog integrates smoothly with the catalog data structures of the marketplace operator. So that's the catalog. And then there's the offer integrations, which is how much the price or inventory is changing. Those updates may come weekly, daily, hourly, depending on how fast moving products are. And then there's the order integration. So ability to submit an order for fulfillment and updates on order status. And then last but not least is messaging. So if a customer asks a question to the seller, typically want to anonymize that so you don't have platform leakage or customers going directly to the manufacturer or distributor instead of going through the marketplace. So a variety of different integrations there.
Great. Good answer. Thank you. So the next one is about specifically the sellers, right? Because we're talking about the manufacturers getting their resellers or distributors or the providers, whatever you call them, to participate. And this question's pretty simple on that front, but pretty complex in execution. How hard is it to get these resellers to engage in such a marketplace? And Tom, let's start with you.
Yeah, that can be part of the chicken and the egg problem. It's a virtuous cycle flywheel which keeps building upon itself as you build more buyers and more sellers in your network. A lot of people don't put enough effort and strategy and thought into recruiting sellers, resellers, or the existing channel and converting them over to that business model. For a lot of organizations, it might be a simplification. If they can get additional orders, so for Best Buy to start accepting orders from Amazon, a lot of organizations may find that that's great. It's additional order traffic for us. Our brand is not trying to go behind our backs. They're enabling us with more business. So they may be open to it. Some that are, really depends on the industry. There's quite a bit of variance there from industry, the sophistication of the reseller network, but definitely is an important part of the marketplace launch strategy to consider and plan for and allocate the appropriate amount of time and human resources to make it happen.
I would add just one thing to what Tom said too. I think, you know your site, your property the best. And I think, you have a lot of statistics at hand that you can leverage from your analytics package, whether you use something like Google or Adobe Analytics. And part of what your job is too, is to prepare kind of that sales presentation to these sellers as to why you want them to come, to you. And that really has a lot to do with the traffic that you generate on your site. That's the convincing part of this, right? They may be selling direct today, and your pitch is that I've got 3x the traffic you have or 4x the traffic you have. So this, in absence of me selling this particular category on my site, you're going to be it. And I think that's where you need to think of it as kind of the sales pitch to these sellers. Like, what are you offering them? There's not going to be category overlap with the stuff that you already sell. It's additive, etc. And I think that's often the best way to convince many of these sellers that it's an opportunity for them that will expand their sales, even if they have to put some work into managing the channel on their side.
And that goes nicely into the next question, actually, is that, and you guys have spoken about this a little bit in terms of the the messaging, the communication, the tax payment considerations, things like that these now marketplace sellers need to be aware of. But as a marketplace operator, how do you prepare a distribution channel for that marketplace model? Like, what are the things they need to be aware of? Like, what kind of communication plan and things like that can you do as an operator? Let's start with Tom there.
So yeah, definitely coming up with that both communication and marketing plan. Most organizations have focused their energies on recruiting or attracting customers, not the other half of the equation in a marketplace. Again, it's a two-sided marketplace or multiple-sided at least. And coming up with a great marketing plan, marketing automation, tracking, and even automating somewhat the onboarding process of marketplace sellers into the system through some automated form collection. Very important as you start scaling to, again, hundreds or thousands of sellers, automating a lot of that process. In fact, even having a online application form where you collect some basic information, which can be automated for setting up a storefront for that reseller or seller on your third-party seller in your network. So it combines both the marketing outreach and the onboarding communication and walking them through that process of bringing them on board. Once there are some sellers on board or resellers on board, some of those might be resellers that you want to showcase and promote out to your customers. So that's another element to consider as well.
Yeah, and I would say I like what Tom said about kind of both the marketing and the operational side of that. And I think that's the analogy he used of the way you think about your consumers as well kind of applies here too, right? You have people that are in charge of the customer acquisition, right? That whether it's through SEO or through paid ads or through email campaigns, right? It's that kind of mindset towards attracting the sellers. And then there's the operational side of it and the onboarding of it. And I think, again, as you begin to try to scale this side of it, you have to start thinking about how can I make this as the lowest amount of labor intensive process as possible. And that could be, videos that would walk them through on how to, apply online, set up the initial catalog, operate in the marketplace, right? Think about all the ways that you can provide them with the sort of self-learning tools they need to be able to operate in that marketplace. And again, initially, you'll probably have to do some of this live as you kind of work out the process with your first, batch of sellers. But your goal over time ought to be to really, automate as much of that as possible and make the onboarding, the approval, the enablement, and then the operational side of it as automated as possible with the self-serve capability of the learning.
Great. This next one came to us actually through the chat from Tiago, and I think this is a good question, and something, Tom, that I know a lot of our customers and Michael, I'm sure your customers as well, ask this a lot, and especially in the beginning of the process. What's the level of expertise needed to actually run a marketplace successfully, and should that be outsourced? And Tom, let's start with you, and Michael, I know you have some thoughts on this too.
Great. So usually what we end up doing is helping our customers, at least in the beginning phases, in the operation. You can consider the seller. There's a couple of positions I drew in that diagram of the platform business model. It's predominantly seller recruitment and seller management. Seller management can include seller support. So really finding the sellers, helping them integrate or bring in their catalogs into the marketplace, and then supporting the sales with the customers. Some of this requires certain techniques to do outreach. It's much like the skill of becoming a merchandiser for a first-party e-commerce operation. You have to have a similar mindset in terms of recruiting sellers and helping them promote their products on your website. So sometimes we offer it as sort of a business process outsourcing in the initial phases, or as a cost savings option, providing some of those services from Brazil or India for US clients or European clients. But once it's up and running, it's not too hard to learn. We certainly help enable our clients to do that. So much like learning how to operate an e-commerce site, and in the early years, 15, 20 plus years ago, there was a lot of external help needed to operate the commerce site. Now, as the tools, especially like VTEX, gets more and more robust with features built in, great help, easy to use interfaces, it becomes less of a challenge and can be brought in-house fairly easily after some initial mentoring and knowledge transfer, train the trainer type processes to bring it all in-house.
Yeah, and I think I'd add to that too. I think, there used to be, that kind of in the early days of the internet, right? You build an e-commerce site and it was kind of like, you build it and they will come. And I think we kind of all learned that, like, there's just, there's too many people out there selling today. Like, you have to market to the customer. And so in my, and I would, it's not just my, but in VTEX's experience, right? When we look at people that have tried the marketplace model, I think if you walk into it like, I'm just going to do this with my existing staff, we'll carve out some time in their existing day to do this. It's very rare that you meet a retailer today who has enough time to do everything they want to do on their current B2C site, right? And so I think, going into this and knowing that you're going to convince your executives to maybe try this model, and here's why, and here's the kind of ROI we're going to paint for it. I do think, if you're not prepared to, say, invest and go hire people to help you in this space, and you want to test it, then I think working with a firm like Tom's that can help, manage this process and help you with the seller onboarding, recruitment, enabling those people to get products up in the marketplace, all that stuff, it takes time and outreach. And I think it's a great way to start. And then, as Tom said, if, you get it up and running, you're successful, then you can start to bring the staff on and, shift that more to an in-house operation. But I think it's a great way to approach the model and to go into it with the right mindset, which is like, I have to put effort into this. It's not just a build it and they will come kind of operation.
Very true. All right, I see one other question here that came in from somebody, I guess in India, about a chemical marketplace for importing chemicals, B2B. And that's actually, we've launched and did a webinar a couple months ago about a chemicals marketplace here in the US called ChemDirect. That recording should be available on our Marketplace Best Practices series. We have these webinars every month in a whole library of webinars. So that definitely is one of those fast-growing industries, the chemical B2B space. So I suggest watching that recording of that webinar. But just to be one other consideration is last comment here is restricted goods. We have an upcoming webinar on this as well. So chemicals, hazmat materials, firearms, CBD, tobacco, alcohol. A lot of these restricted goods have very particular payment, tax, and shipping constraints on them. So we'll be addressing that in an upcoming webinar. So I think we're right at time now, or we've got 4 minutes left. So we'll give everybody a chance to take a little break before your next meeting. I'd like to thank Michael very much for your thought leadership and joining me in this webinar today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. Really enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody, for attending today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.